Hey, I had to jump over here to talk about theme because the page was missing from my notes for some reason when I was doing the original, and I just talk. I don't really think when I'm talking. So I had to jump over here to talk about that, but we'll get back to other Josh in just a second. So I want to talk about theme here. In the book, the main theme is what happens when man plays God. And that sort of idea is played out throughout the book. Whereas in the movie, it's a very similar theme, and Malcolm even talks about it when he has that line where it's God creates dinosaur, God destroys dinosaur, God creates man, man destroys God, dinosaur kills man. That's a whole thing throughout the movie as well. So that idea is still there in the movie, this what happens when man becomes God. But also in the book, it deals with like how much should human beings be allowed to do, really, and not self-regulated, but it's like, how much are we capable of taking on? Like, are we capable? We might be capable of creating life, but are we capable of controlling it and of using it for good? And in this case, no, we absolutely would not be. And like I described with Grant, or maybe I will describe, I don't know where this clip is going to go in the video, but with Grant having this moral decision, and that was what was driving the plot. That's what the book is really all about, the morality of what they're doing. And this at sort of a, it was sort of a groundbreaking time for cloning. There was the sheep in Scotland that was cloned for the first time an animal was cloned, and this is dealing with cloning dinosaurs. And it was very much at that time, the early 90s, when cloning was a hot button topic. So you have to look back to that time and say, well, this really was a cautionary tale of morality and what human beings, how much we should actually mess with the creation. And it's can we take it and can we do what God does? And the answer is always going to be no. So this book is such a great cautionary tale on that. But just the morality that is the line that runs through the entire book, it ties it all together so nicely. So in the movie, we have Ian Malcolm saying that, and we sort of like have that feeling. But the book, it's all about morality, start to finish. Should I do this? Can I do this? Can I do it? And Malcolm even says in the book and in the movie, that through line in the book tied it all together very well. Whereas I think in the movie, they didn't quite, it was more just a horror movie. The book is so much more sci-fi, where there's an underlying theme through the whole thing that's supposed to teach you a lesson and teach you about humanity. So as far as theming goes, the book definitely nailed it. Also, there's a lot of pictograms and different aspects of this like computer technology thing that Michael Crichton was very interested in, and he did a ton of research on for this book and for a bunch of other books that I'm planning on reading in the future now that I see what he's like with this computer technology stuff. He's very interested in computer science. So there's a theme of that too, where it's this like emerging technology, and how much of that can we harness, and how much should we harness, and what can we use for good, and what can be used for evil. So the 90s, especially the early 90s, was a major transition period in the world where we were all becoming more interconnected, and we were all seeing exactly how small the world really was. And it was because of technology. So technology was at the forefront. It was almost like living in a science fiction world in the early 90s, where things were advancing so quickly. And now, 30 some years later, you see those advancements even more rapidly, and you see all of that groundwork that was built throughout the late 80s, early 90s that sets us up to now. So Crichton was at the forefront of that on the computer science side of things, and that theme is completely lost in the movie. In the book, it's so much more explored and spoken about more like in a thoughtful manner. Thoughtful? Is that a word? Teachful? I don't know, it teaches us things. So before I stumble over more words, I'll kick it back to other Josh. So lastly, I want to get into some of the plot stuff. And by the way, before I do that, count how many dinosaurs are behind me, because there's dinosaurs hidden in all the plants around. Count how many are there and comment down below how many you think are there. So the plot, probably one of my favorite scenes is on the river. So they had just escaped the herd of dinosaurs, which happens in the movie. It was Alan Grant and the kids. They just escaped the herd of dinosaurs roaming through that trample over, and they get this raft. They find a raft in like a storage shed, and they jump on the river and they're going. And this is towards the end of the book. And then they see the T-Rex sleeping. Now the T-Rex is the dinosaur in the book, whereas the velociraptors are much more the talked about thing in the movie. The T-Rex is the boss king in this book. And I love that because, I love T-Rex. T-Rex is back here a couple times. So he is definitely the key dinosaur in this book, the alpha predator, if you will. And so he's sleeping on a tree because he just ate one of those duckbill things. And so they kind of float by, but then Lex coughs and wakes him up. And this is the coolest scene that I think I've ever read in a book. And the T-Rex jumps into the river and swims at them, full jaws chomping. And it is the most intense scene that I think I've read in forever. That T-Rex swimming and chasing the raft down the river, and then they get to a narrow part and he can't get in anymore, so he jumps up on the bank and runs down the side of the bank, chomping through into the river at them, through the vines and the trees and everything. And oh my goodness, it was such an amazing scene. And then they float further down the river and they think they're free of the T-Rex. And then they see him again and chomp, chomp, chomp. He's going crazy. And then he gets stuck in some vines and they go down to the river a little bit more. And then they see two Dilophosaurus down there. And we already know what they did to Dennis Nedry. So you're like, oh man. And they're almost back to the compound. And so they have to just like hold their breath so these Dilophosaurs don't see them. But who sees them? The T-Rex. And then here comes Muldoon out of nowhere and boom, 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 lights them up with some tranks and drops them and they can get free. And oh, man, such a cool scene. Michael Crichton, absolute expert at writing intense, dramatic scenes like that. And your heart was racing from beginning to end when they were on the river. And that scene was duplicated in the movie when the T-Rex is running after the Jeep. And I thought that it was a disservice to the book that they didn't have a swimming T-Rex in the movie. When I read that scene, I was like, that's what was missing in the movie. A movie that I would say is perfect. That was missing. Now I know things that are missing. Another thing that was missing, but it did come in later on in one of the other movies, was a scene in the aviary. So the river goes through the aviary. So they're on the raft and they get into the aviary and they're trying to find shelter. And then here's all these pterodons coming down and attacking them. And Grant's beating them. He's so cool. I told you he was a major badass. And he's just beating them. And one of them picks up one of the kids, Tim, and flies off. And he's just going crazy. And oh man, such an intense scene. And it was kind of replicated in one of the other movies. I want to say it was Jurassic Park 3, but I'm not 100% sure. Where the pterodons are in the aviary. And I was disappointed that the aviary wasn't part of the original movie because it was such a big part of the of Jurassic World movies. That trilogy then, the most recent trilogy, it was such a big part of that I was like, man, that needed to be in that original movie because that was crazy. Another part that is out of the movie, but it's in the book and it's a major part of it, is after the T-Rex attack at the beginning, when they're taking the tour and the T-Rex attacks, Lex, Tim, Alan Grant, they all get away, and they have this high point in a tree, where they're stuck in a tree then, which is in the movie, where the tree falls and stuff like that. And they can see across the way, and they have binoculars because Tim is prepared. And they can see a ship that's leaving the dock, and they can see dinosaurs on the ship. They assume they're velociraptors. And so they time out how long it takes for the ship to get to the port, and they need their whole purpose in moving through the park is to get back to the compound to warn the ship that there's dinosaurs on the ship. Don't go back to the shore. So that was the motivation. In the movie, the motivation is more just survival based. And there's a couple other people that die in that scene, which are not in the movie. Well, the one guy is in the movie, but their whole motive in the movie is survival. They need to get back to the compound for survival. But this is much more morally structured. They need to get back to the compound because they could have easily just stayed in the tree, waited till morning, and just hope somebody picks them up at some point. Because they're in a tree, you know, what's going to happen? But they have this moral dilemma that they need to save the people on the mainland. So they need to get back to the compound to radio to the ship. So I love that part of that moral dilemma, that Grant had to say, hey, look, I need to take these kids through the park. You know, I know there's dinosaurs everywhere. We just got attacked by the largest carnivore in the park, and we need to move it along. Speaking of largest carnivore, there's a baby T-Rex. I'm just going to leave it at that. I want you to read the book. There's a baby T-Rex. It's not cute at all. But also with that travel through the park, we learn so much more about the structure of the park, the layout of the park, and it's so much different than in the movie. Actually, in one of the versions of the book that I have here, there's a map of the park, and it's different than in the movie as far as the layout, because there's one part towards the end. I'm not going to spoil the very ending, but it comes into Grant's expertise that I talked about. So I won't spoil the very ending for you, but that part's not in the movie yet either, and I loved it. It was super intense. Great, super intense ending. But there's a lot of parts in the park that are not represented in the movie that I thought were cool. So the park spirals out from a center point, and everything is laid out in quadrants from that center point, so that the animals are kind of quarantined to certain areas, but it feels more free to roam. So it's set up more like a modern zoo, where you have high points to view the animals so you don't see the big moat that's keeping them away from you. But then the animals are also held within an area, and you can't see perimeters of that area. I love that part about it because it showed the thoughtfulness that went into actually building the park, that at some point there was a thought for animals, and it all came from Wu. Wu had a heart for these dinosaurs. In the movie, you kind of see him, he's like talking about the baby dinos, and he's like, oh yeah, you know, it's baby dinos, whatever, very cute. But for the most part, he's using the animals for his own personal scientific gain and financial gain. In the movie, he has a heart for these animals. He wants to grow them to be authentically what they were when they were first on Earth. And in the movie, you don't get that sense. He's programming dinosaurs to be bigger and more teeth and more aggressive. But in the book, he really wants them to be true to form. So he genetically modifies certain things about them to be more true to form. And also, they talk about, well, in Jurassic World movies, they talked about having the trackers in their neck that the one dinosaur digs out, but you have the trackers in their neck that they can just push a button and they're dead. And they actually do that at one point in Jurassic World. But in here, it's a lipocene, I think it was. It's a chemical compound that they deprive the animal, but they need it. So they give it to them through their food and through injections, so that if they do leave the park, they would be dead within 24 hours without having that Lifacin, I believe it was, given to them. So I thought that was really cool in the book because it kind of explained that they had fail-safes built in, and they were more natural than push a button and all the dinosaurs die. Like, it was more of a natural fail-safe where they would actually die of natural causes for the depletion of whatever this this natural chemical was that was in them. So I like that. And also, it's not an obsession about velociraptors. Velociraptors play a massive role in the book, don't get me wrong, but they're not like the one and only thing. There's sort of a thing towards the end of the book that brings in a lot more action and excitement and a lot more problems for people because they are such an aggressive animal. There's more dark scenes, and I don't mean dark like morbid. The whole thing is incredibly morbid, very graphic. The book is very graphic as far as the way the dinosaurs kill people and it's just very graphic, which is fitting for the movie. So that's great. I love all that they kept that sort of spirit of the book in the movie. Also, I heard that Steven Spielberg bought the rights to make the movie from Crichton before he even finished the book, which I think is so cool. And that's why the movie came out so quickly after the book. It was only a couple of years later the movie came out, which you see that happening now. But back in the 90s, you got to remember, like, it took a lot longer to film and produce movies because it was just beginning sort of a digital age. And Jurassic Park used all practical effects. So it was definitely a time-consuming process making that movie. So I believe that. I see no evidence against it. I see no evidence for it. It's just kind of a rumor, I guess, that he bought the rights before the book was even finished. But hey, good on you, Spielberg, because the movie, like I said, one of my all-time favorites growing up, still one of my all-time favorites. But this book, man, you got to read this thing. I know this was a super long video, but this is the Book Was Better book club. This is where I really dig into it. So now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the March read, Jurassic Park. Comment down below with your critique. If I said something really stupid, comment down below. Wouldn't it be the first time? And it wouldn't be the first time somebody called me out on it. But comment down below because I want this book club to be like a discussion in the comments section. So get down there, talk about this. But that was our March read, Michael Crichton's classic Jurassic Park. Next month, this is for April, because this is the end of March right now. So the April read is going to be Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Another one of my favorites. The movie Blade Runner was based on this book by Philip K. Dick. And I forgot to bring it up here with me, but I'm holding it right here. Pop, pop. So Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Man, a mind-bending, action-packed thriller, just absolutely perfect. There's elements of what does it mean to be human, which is what I always look for in a science fiction book, and what the question I think every science fiction book needs to ask, and most of them answer: what does it mean to be human? This book is quintessentially what does it mean to be human. It touches on religion. It touches on spirituality built into humans. It touches on what we need to achieve to be a human being and what an android would need to achieve to be on the same playing field as a human being. Just spectacular book. It deals a lot with greed and lust and desires of the heart. It's just a really beautiful book, and I think very poignant for this day and age, with a lot of the technologies outweighing any kind of rational thought. It's perfect. It really is. One of my favorite sci-fi books. Great movie, by the way, too. Blade Runner is the movie with Harrison Ford. And so I recommend read the book, watch the movie, and we'll talk about that one at the end of April. So about 30 days or so from now, we'll discuss that. But that's our next read, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. This was the Book Was Better book club review of Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton and Steven Spielberg. I guess, you know, that's that, folks. This is a nice, really long video for you. So I'm Josh. This is the Sci Fi Bookery. This was the Book Was Better book club. We'll see you next time.